You don't just drive a car like this, you wear it. Like a fuel-injected big block superhero. Somewhere between Don Garlitz and Evel Knievel. C3 Corvettes have always been popular, and it's one of those situations where if you come across one of these cars, you have to consider, should I restore it to original, or are there things missing from it that will allow me to guilt-free modify the car and have some fun with it? And there's certain C3s that you just don't mess with, right? One C3 Corvette that you'd never want to mess with is the Holy Grail car. That's an L88 option Corvette. That means it came with a 430 horsepower 427 that really made a lot more than 430 horsepower. That's what they advertised it as. It was a single 4-barrel solid camshaft, 12.5-to-1 compression race engine in a 69 Corvette that really didn't have much else as far as creature comforts. They only made 116 of those for 1969, so if you find one today, they're super rare, and those are cars you restore. In our case, we had a customer that came to us and said, hey, I've always loved that 69 Corvette style, and I found one that doesn't have any of its original parts. The engine's long gone, it's a different color, so what can we do? And we had a big chat with him, and we said, well, what's the draw for you about this Corvette? And he said, well, I've always wanted a 427, right? 427 is kind of a magic number when it comes to Corvettes. So in this case, because that original engine was gone, we basically had a blank slate, and we decided to start with a 427, but in this case, a brand new ZZ 427 from Chevrolet. And this one makes 480 horsepower, 490 pound-feet of torque at a paltry 10-to-1 compression. So it's got aluminum heads, full roller cam and roller valve train, and it runs fine on pump gas. So now we have an engine that's gonna make close to the same power of that race L88 car, but with its aluminum heads and roller valve train and roller cam, it's gonna be safer on the street and it will run fine on today's gasoline. Now here at V8 Speed and Resto, we love the color red, but we've had a lot of red Corvettes come through here, and we talked to the customer about his vision of how this car looks. And he was not a fan of red. In fact, he lives in the middle of the country and is a Kansas Jayhawk fan. Of course, the Kansas Jayhawk is blue, so we started to keep a blue color in mind of what this thing might end up being. But the other questions we always ask is, what are you gonna do with the car, right? You know, some people like to take these cars on weekends, do a cars and coffee and polish them up. Some people like to road race them, some people like to go drag racing, some people like to do long distance cruises. So the more we know about what the customer envisions his perfect day with this car is, the more we can choose the right parts to make the car do what he wants it to do. And in this case, it was a combination of things. Yes, it had to have a 427, but he also wanted a manual transmission. And today there's a great option with the Tremec TKX 5-speed. It's a slightly smaller diameter transmission, so it fits well in these cars. It handles the power of a big block, and our friends at Modern Driveline have put together a package to make this fit inside the Corvette with minimal intrusion. Now, he knew he wasn't going to be driving this car every day, so whenever he had the time to go turn the key, he wanted the car to start right up. And that, in our case, usually means some sort of electronic fuel injection. In this case, we went with a Holley Terminator setup, which allows for not just basic fuel injection, but the ability to do some advanced tuning. It does some self-calibration and provides a look that hides underneath an original style air cleaner so that you can't really tell this has been fuel injected. He also wanted the ability to drive this car comfortably all day long and listen to his tunes and be comfortable. So from a suspension standpoint, we chose some suspension parts from Global West to improve the way the car handled, a quicker ratio Borgeson steering gear so that it steered more precise. Although Corvettes were known to be good handling cars, they did have a kind of a strange hydraulic ram assist steering system, which meant that the steering pump itself didn't have hydraulic fluid going through it. It had a hydraulic ram that pushed the wheels back and forth as you turned the wheel. So you can eliminate a lot of that extra motion by running with a power steering gearbox that puts everything inside of it. And the Borgeson is a great choice to do this. It's nice and nimble and still gives a good steering feel, not too much assist, so it's comfortable to drive. One thing we've learned is that just about every Corvette from this generation has worn out the rear suspension. It never fails. There's bearings in the rear trailing arms, there's bushings on the transverse leaf spring and back, and over time these things just wear out, and the rear axle starts to make noise, and the half shafts make noise in the center section. So we always plan on just rebuilding those and adding reinforced higher performance pieces back there whenever we start a C3 Corvette project. Also in the plan was a hydraulic brake assist unit from Hydratech. This applies far more brake boost than a vacuum booster. Plus it's small, so it fits nicer with the big block V8 under the hood. We have a lot of experience with Wilwood. Wilwood originally did nothing but race brakes and then kind of evolved into the street. So they have a high performance lineage that has always served well in the projects we build. The car came apart pretty easily. When it arrived, it had a worn out small block 350 V8 that went to the wayside to prepare for the big block. With this, we had to update the cooling system and change the engine mounts and do a few things. But Corvettes came with these from the factory as an option, so those parts are readily available. A consideration on any engine swap is the front accessory drive, alternator, power steering pump, and in this case, the air conditioning compressor. And to keep everything packaged real nicely, we used a whole bracket system from Vintage Air called the Vintage Air FrontRunner. And this is a really cool design because it's a truss that mounts to some studs that go into the block, and then all the accessories hang off the truss. So we don't have bracketry going to the top of the intake manifold or to the cylinder heads. The bonus is that this is half of our AC system that we'll be putting inside the car. It's kind of interesting what you learn about these cars when you take them apart and start to restore them. We learned that this one was a theft recovery at some point. This poor car got stolen. And I remember growing up in the Chicago area in the late 70s, there was a statistic that said if you bought a Corvette like this and parked it on a city street, it had a lifespan of 24 to 36 hours before it got stolen. I mean, they were stolen all the time. And in fact, the Corvette, because they got stolen so much, it led Chevrolet into designing the pass key system, which is the key with the chip in it, which made it a lot harder to copy the keys and pick the locks. So primarily because Corvettes like this got stolen all the time. There's a couple things to consider when repainting a Corvette. And one of them is that depending on the year of the car, the fiberglass could be reaching the end of its usable lifespan, right? The chassis is steel, and they can be deceiving because, well, you'll never see a rusty Corvette on the outside. Fiberglass doesn't rust. So if you're going to restore one of these, you have to take some time to look underneath and make sure that the steel structure and the area around the passenger cabin, which is called the bird cage, make sure that that is all intact, because that can certainly rust away underneath the fiberglass. Fortunately, this car was not rusty underneath. It was a little dirty and grimy, but the bones were solid. The body, on the other hand, needed a lot of work. And being fiberglass, it is not as rigid as steel. Originally, the fiberglass was developed by Owens Corning on Corvettes, and they said that this stuff would have a 50-year lifespan. 50 years into the future, nobody thought these things would still be around, but here we are. So today, you gotta be careful when you strip a Corvette. This one came back from the paint stripper looking pretty rough. And they did a nice job of going paint layer by paint layer to remove the paint, but it was just a result of that history and time and the effects on the fiberglass that left us with a shell that required a lot of attention. One of the things we did was talk to some other Corvette experts and found a product that we could spray over the whole body that basically re-resined and re-gel coated the whole thing to give us a fresh surface to start with. And we were glad we did that because it provided a whole new level of strength to the body and a new surface to work to make the car straight and look nice. And this comes into play when you are fitting the body panels, the doors, the headlight pop-up doors, the bumpers and the trim, because you can put the car on jack stands or on a lift or on its wheels and adjust the door and get it all to look just perfect. And the weather could change, the temperature could change, you could move to a different part of the floor and the door doesn't fit the same anymore. And usually it's not like a drastic change, but this matters if you're trying to make something look really, really straight and really, really nice. And where you also see it is in the surface of a panel. So you might spend time block sanding the doors and applying filler and sanding them smooth and prime them. And they might be like laser arrow glass straight. And then a few days from now, they might appear twisted or to have a ripple in them. Around here we say fiberglass is alive, and it really feels that way. So to get a Corvette to be really, really straight and have a really glossy, high detailed reflective surface takes a lot of work and a lot of patience. Everything on the car was fit as best it could be. Our team spent the time and really made this car come out nice. So as we think back to what the customer wanted, being some form of a blue Corvette, we wanted to go a few notches beyond a standard blue Corvette. So we enlisted the help of our designer friend, Murray Comant, who came up with a rendering that I think really makes this one unique without making it obnoxious. And Jeff, our painter, came up with a custom color that is, in my mind, just out of sight. In fact, he called it Jayhawk blue, but it is a rich, sparkly, metallic, deep blue that looks pretty subtle until you put it out in the sunlight, and then it starts to shimmer and twinkle, and it looks fantastic. And Murray's design took an original Corvette design element, which was the big block hood with what we call kind of a chevron stripe that goes around the bulge in the hood, and he inserted a charcoal gray band with a red pinstripe around that. Couple that with a larger diameter modern wheel and a red line tire, and you have a color combination that is the deep blue, kind of the charcoal gray and the red. So it's kind of patriotic looking and looks really good on this Corvette. After all the block sanding of the fillers and the primers and the surfacer and the sealer was applied, it was time to spray that cosmic blue on the car. And it's always cool to me to see the transformation, especially when it's as dramatic as a white sealer to a rich blue like this one. The blue looked really good straight out of the gun. Jeff laid out the stripes for the hood and sprayed all that stuff. But modern paint is basically flat until you apply the clear coat. And once this thing got cleared, the whole thing came to life. When you buy a ZZ427 V8 engine, it comes from the factory with the block painted black, aluminum heads, and a black cast aluminum valve cover that says 427 or something on it, which is cool, but it didn't really fit the look of this car. So we painted the engine poppy red, which is Chevy orange, to make the block look more time correct for the 69 era of the car. And then we added a set of polished cast aluminum finned valve covers with the Corvette script on them. And these are kind of reminiscent of the classic small block Corvette script, just upscaled for the big block. Couple that with the aluminum intake and that black vintage air FrontRunner system, and you've got an engine that does not look out of place from a time perspective under the flip-up hood of this Corvette. This car has a pretty cool gauge set from the factory, and the customer was happy with it. So we put new lenses in the gauges and repaired the gauges and kind of restored them so that they all functioned as new. Inside the dash, we buried a Dakota digital cruise control module. Cruise is one of those things we take for granted on modern cars. When you drive an old car that does not have cruise, your foot will let you know. So that was a nice little upgrade. Of course, the vintage air controller, which mimics the original style, so it doesn't look out of place. We added a retro sound radio so that, again, it's got the 2-shaft and it didn't require cutting up the dashboard or putting a DIN or a screen in the dash. We added seat heaters and coolers, and then our upholstery team started working on the rest of the interior. Some of the pieces were restored. We put new carpet in the car that we modified to fit a little bit nicer. But the seats were a real showpiece. These are the original Corvette bucket seats that we stuffed with new foam. But for a nice detail, we recreated new seat covers in-house using a combination of textured and perforated leather and stitched them all together with a matching blue stitch, the same color as the outside of the car. And sometimes when I see custom cars that have piping or stitching that's a different color, it tends to stand out a little too much. But in this case, I think it complements it really nice. The wheels are from Rocket Racing, and they came out of the box with a kind of a silver appearance on the face. We painted those a gunmetal color to match the stripe in the hood. And the tires we got from Diamondback Classics, which have a red line vulcanized onto them. So it's not like tire paint, it's never coming off, and it looks really great on the car with those modern wheels. Although this car, because of the way the body style is so classic, you can run all kinds of wheel combinations, from a traditional Chevy Rally to a Krager from the 70s to something modern like this, and the car will look good wearing any of them. So when all the final details were put on the car, all the emblems, the badging, and the tune was set, and we did some test driving on the car, and that new exhaust rumbled to life. We were all very happy with it. It's a stunning car. It just has that look. And we weren't the only ones to think so. In fact, there's a museum in Kansas that saw the build of this car and said, hey, we have a special Corvette exhibition coming up. Can we have this one on display? And of course, the owner was very flattered. So really the car's public display was in a museum showcase of other high-profile Corvettes. It was really cool. And then we brought the car to the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals, where it was part of our V8 Speed and Resto shop 20th anniversary display. And we had some of our other flagship cars that we built over the years, and people just loved seeing that Corvette there. And it was fun because it was surrounded by other real L88 Corvettes and all kinds of other stock and original Corvettes, so people could see the subtle things that we did to make this one different. And at the end of the day, it got judged by the MCACN team and scored really, really well. The owner and the team were all very excited to learn that the car scored 994 out of a possible 1,000 points. So looking back, did we achieve the goals? I really think so. We came up with a design that was timeless. I mean, this car is going to look good forever. It's got that magic number 427 under the hood. It makes great power. It shifts awesome with the 5-speed. It drives and handles phenomenally. It's super comfortable. It's got the AC and the audio and the cruise and the tilt column and all the things the customer wanted inside the car. So we were fortunate and honored to be able to bring this car to life, and then just to have it validated by a museum and a high score at a national show really was a nice honor for the team and for the customer. Like it?
Love it. It's awesome.
So what does your perfect day look like with a hot rod or classic or custom car? Doesn't have to be a Corvette. We build all kinds of cool stuff here at V8 Speed and Resto. And you can reach out to us and ask us anytime how we can get started on your dream car. Just go to v8speedshop.com.